My guest today is Roxy Rhodes. She's a psychotherapist and a business coach with a private practice in Derbyshire who works predominantly with women who are ready to make some life changes. Her no BS, filter-free and empathic approach makes her a force to be reckoned with. She'll call you out on your excuses and hold your hand, to make the changes. Her sarcastic humour will immediately put you at ease and you'll find yourself feeling like you've known her for years. She genuinely loves to watch women grow and say that's her why. That underpins everything that she does. And good morning, Roxy. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. As you know, my show is called Unbroken, and the first question that I ask all of my guests is, what does that word unbroken mean to you?
Okay, so for me, it means kind of being whole and authentic and not using the perfectly valid reasons that we've all got as an excuse to not do the things that we want to do.
I like that because we can, I guess, almost as what you're saying, is go into victim mode. Well,
And
this
we do it,
happened to me, so this is why, and I'll never get over this, and da 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 da, all the stories that we tell ourselves.
the stories that we tell ourselves is one of the most powerful things I talk about because I think a lot of time we don't even know we're doing it. We use things so frequently just as an excuse, as a reason not to do the stuff.
So even
And
though we've said we're not going to get caught in our story, you do have a big story,
I
which we
do.
are going to talk about. And it started when you were just 2 years old, didn't it?
It did. And I'm really glad it happened back then because I think it would be a really, really different outcome if it happened to you as an adult.
Mhm.
But yes, so I was 2 and I was 70% scalded, which is
How
really
did
weird.
this come about? Because I know the part that you were scored, and it was
Yeah.
70% of your body, and you
Yeah.
spent 6 months in intensive care in Sheffield.
Mhm.
But how did you get scolded as a little tot?
So my mum was 20, 22. 20. She was 20 when she had me, she was 22. And we lived in an old house. It was the days of the coal fires. So the hot water was scalding hot. And my mum simply went into the bathroom, turned the taps on. My baby sister started crying. She was only 6 months old. And my mum went out of the bathroom, didn't click the door shut, just something as teeny as that.
Mhm.
And I tottered in age 2. And we never really know what happened. Apparently, I said I was reaching for the bubbles or something at some point, and I fell in. But the twist of the story is that that particular day, we lived in a cul-de-sac and the council were working on the water mains and they turned the cold water off and nobody knew. So there was no cold water to run me under. So I screamed. My mum came in. I was standing up and she tried to take my socks off and all my skin peeled away with my socks, basically. So she rang an
And
ambulance
this
from
is
there.
what you've been told, or do you remember this?
I don't remember this. I've got lots of photographs of this time. So we've got lots of clinical photographs because I was in a lot of clinical studies back then. So as an adult at 50% burned back in 1987, you were almost certain to die. And I was 70%, I was 2. So I don't
And you
remember a
think
lot
of a
of
little
this.
2-year-old's body, 70%, you're pretty much covered.
And I still am, but as I've grown, it feels like less. So it's basically my face and my left arm that are fine. The rest of me is, yeah, entirely covered. And I've got little children now. So just picturing that on their bodies is just horrific.
So you said your sister was just 6 months old, your
Yeah.
mum was only 22, and your,
Yeah.
your dad worked down in the pit. This was 1987, and you spent 6 months in hospital, and I believe your organs kind of literally started to shut down. Your
Yeah.
skin was hanging off of you. How have you survived this when an adult's only got 50% chance
Yeah.
of survival?
They've no idea, we've no idea. Basically, strength and good luck, I will add into there.
Mhm.
Um, so much love and support. But as a child, I think children are a lot more resilient than adults in lots of ways, and they don't know so much stuff that's happening to them that I feel like the mental battle that an adult would have at that time, children don't have as well, which is a really strange thing to say, I think, but they don't have as much to process.
Yes, and
Does
not
that
so
make sense?
conditioned by
Yeah.
experiences in life, and they don't carry all that stuff.
I certainly weren't laid there thinking, what will I look like after this? Because the child doesn't have that kind of perception about it. So I don't know that they would think about it in the same way that you would now.
But amazingly, your organs did start to work again, even though they thought that they
Yeah.
might need to amputate. Was it your hands and your
Hand and
feet?
feet. Yeah. So basically everything shuts down. You're in shock. Your body can't handle anymore. And I remember my dad telling me the story of he just heard my stomach gurgle at one point, and it was like the biggest lifeline had been thrown to them because it meant something inside me was like moving again. So yeah, my organs started moving. Once they determined that I would probably survive, yeah, they said I'd have to have my hands and feet amputated, that I'd never walk, I'd never go in the sun. We didn't know if I'd be able to have children because of all the shock and who knew what internal damage there was.
So you wouldn't have a normal life, basically.
Not at all.
They must have been so concerned for what the future would look like for you. I mean, you know, if you couldn't have a social life, you couldn't go outside, you couldn't walk, you know, would people discriminate against you?
Yeah.
All of that must have been, a worry, a burden for your family. And
I can't imagine what my mum went through. She still doesn't talk about it much, but she started to since I've started sharing the story a little bit, which I think is really a great thing. But basically, she had to block it out because the guilt that she was carrying as well, she feels this is entirely on her shoulders and still does. I cannot imagine watching my kids go through that. And I'm much older than my mum was at the time. Yeah, just the anxiety, the predictions of what life's going to be like, that must have just consumed them.
So she's riddled with mother's guilt of,
Still.
oh my gosh, I left her and the door was open and the water was on and
Yeah.
I shouldn't have done that. And then she's like, what now is her future going to look like?
And I think that is the one thing that I'm most grateful for out of all of this, because as a kid, like I said about this whole perception thing, you don't know there's something wrong with you till someone tells you there's something wrong with you. As a child, you accept everything for as it is. And because my parents made it really clear there was nothing wrong with me, I didn't believe there was.
So you never had a seed of doubt. You know, you've got a younger sister, year and a half younger, and you never looked at her skin and thought, why is her skin all smooth and mine's got these marks, these scars? It never occurred to you?
I think it was just always an open conversation that my skin was like this and hers was like that. And that's it. That doesn't mean one of them there's something wrong with. It's impossible to bully someone if they don't mind about the stuff you're trying to bully them about. It's entirely impossible to be vulnerable if you don't mind about the thing in the first place. And because I clearly had at least portrayed I didn't mind, then nobody else bothered in the slightest.
So you never had any bullying or anything?
Not my whole life.
That's amazing.
I never didn't have a boyfriend. I had a lovely circle of friends, and that still exists now. It's
Brilliant. So when you left school, you always wanted to be a nurse, I believe, didn't you? But you went into the corporate world.
So even as a child, there's pictures of me dressed up as a nurse, and it's unsurprising that they were my heroes because I worshipped them in hospital. I always wanted to be a nurse, but the whole all-rounder thing has been a bit of a concept throughout my life. So I do a job, I do it well, I get bored, I don't want to pay the time to get promoted, so I hop on to another job. So I hopped through corporate jobs for a little while. Then I jacked it all in and went travelling for a year.
And where did you go?
So I went to Australia and drove a camper van for a year.
Wow.
So I left my partner then, who was a lovely bloke, but I was just bored of life. So he bought me out of the house. I went off traveling for a year and I came back and I got a corporate job for a while. But again, the same situation. I'm bored. And I met my husband, my now husband, and we moved in together, and I decided that I was going to go and do nurse training at that point. So I moved away from corporate and I went to work in care for a while I was waiting for my nurse degree to start. And I worked in care homes. I did care in the community, and I worked in a hospital as like a healthcare assistant, and they were the best jobs that I've ever had. Minimum wage, horrific. Some of the things I did in those jobs are just unbelievable. And I had the best time. And so I started on my nursing degree in 2013. And then I found out I was pregnant.
Oh, wow. And you didn't even know if you could have a baby, really, did you? Because you didn't know
no
what
idea.
The damage had been done.
Nope. And yeah, it was an entire shock and surprise. I cried for a week. And then I decided that I didn't want to be doing 13-hour shifts with a baby. So I retrained during my pregnancy and set up my mental health therapy practice when my baby was 6 months old. You know what your life was like before and after, but I don't have that. My life has just always been like this.
But you still were a teen with scarred
Yeah,
skin. So you still did go through that, but you chose not to allow it to change your life in any way. You were treated so normally. You actually thrived at school.
I did. And
Yeah.
it's not even that I was treating it so normal. It just was so normal. And it was almost at the point like I can't do anything. Like I have no issue with this. So anybody else that does is just won't be in my circle.